want to know what it is. The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
Welcome back to MindScience, episode 3. In today's episode, we're talking about how to break free from ego. Now, anyone who knows me well knows that The Matrix is my favorite movie of all time. I fell in love with this movie as a kid, even before I understood any of its rich symbology. But now most of us understand that The Matrix is a brilliant cinematic analogy for spiritual awakening. It represents us breaking free from the matrix of the mind, which is all of the programs of our egoic conditioning, which we have been unconsciously enslaved to for our entire lives. So last week we talked about what the ego is, and in today's episode I want to give you 3 simple steps on how we can begin to break free from the tyranny of our ego using analogies from the Matrix to give us a really solid grasp on what spiritual awakening actually is and how it actually plays out. Now, most people typically believe that having a spiritual awakening feels like this. Which is true for some people, but for most of us, spiritual awakening feels a lot more like this. Because what a spiritual awakening is realizing that you have been a prisoner to a system that has been running you and pretending to be you. You'd been living with the assumption that you really are a separate entity inside of a physical world that actually has free will. But now you realize that you were actually being controlled by a mind-made program that you believed was actually you. You see that it is just a system of automated triggers, which cause us to perceive, to think, and react in ways that at our core, we don't truly want to. Now, this can obviously be a pretty shocking revelation to have. But if you're having this awakening experience, then I encourage you not to let the gravity of this realization cause you to feel afraid or overwhelmed in any way, because that reaction is also just a program of the mind. In truth, this realization should only be a joyful and exciting one, because you've literally just won your freedom back. The awareness that you have been trapped in a psychic software program called the ego is actually the freedom from it. As I've stated in previous episodes, the ego can only be an unconscious action. The moment you are aware of the fact that you were an ego, the program loses its grip and influence over you, because it is dependent on your unconscious belief in it in order for it to sustain itself. And this fact is represented by the agents in the Matrix who seek to destroy anyone who knows what the Matrix is, because they know that they only have power over you when you are unconscious of them. So in the same way, the ego fights to keep you in an unconscious state, which leads me to the first step in breaking free from the mind matrix. Step number 1 is to answer the call. Now in the movie, the first step to breaking Neo out of the Matrix is to get him to question his reality. They encourage Neo to look past the surface layer and become suspicious of the world as he knows it. And as we see in the film, in order for anyone to actually leave the Matrix, they have to answer the call from a higher dimension. Now this call from a higher dimension is the call from your higher self. Because when you've suffered enough at the hands of your ego, then there develops this sort of aching desire to be free from this suffering. And this is literally your higher self letting you know that you are ready to transcend these programs. You're ready to leave the matrix. These programs have served their rightful purpose as the catalyst for your evolution, and you are now ready to go beyond them into the next stage of human consciousness, which we normally refer to as enlightenment. We will eventually stop having a term for enlightenment because it will become normal. It is the destiny of the human race to achieve this state of consciousness collectively, in the same way that we achieved the state of ego in our evolutionary past. So just like Neo, start to become very suspicious of every thought that appears. Consider whether or not you are actually choosing each thought or whether they are just appearing automatically. And this investigation will reveal the fact to you that there are actually two selves at play in your consciousness. There's the automatic self and the natural self, or you could say the ego and you. And it's actually very simple to tell the difference between the two. Every thought which makes you feel bad is coming from the automatic self. Why? Because you never consciously choose to feel bad. If it was up to you, you'd feel good all the time, wouldn't you? You never sit there and think to yourself, you know, I'd like to have some anxiety right now. Let me just peruse through this catalog of thoughts and select one. I choose that one. Ping! That never happens, does it? Thoughts are just arising automatically according to your personal conditioning. So there is no thinker of thoughts. The idea that there's a thinker of thoughts is a program of the matrix. What the ego does is that it tries to endow you with a personal sense of ownership over every thought that appears. So it's like the clown that comes out at the end of the play and takes a bow when the curtains close. But the clown was never in the play. That's because it is a program of the mind which seeks to keep you anchored in the small self identity. But the true self always feels good because it is already perfect and whole and complete. It is always at peace with itself. So anything which causes you to feel less than that is a dead giveaway that it's coming from the program and not from the true self. And these programs always appear in the form of an identity or a belief. And so these identities and beliefs that we hold about ourselves become the anchor points that allow the ego to have influence over us. And that leads me into the second step, which is to begin removing the anchor points of the mind.
Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.
There is no spoon?
Then you'll see that it is not the spoon that bends, it is only yourself.
So the ego thrives on three main anchor points, which are the body, the mind, and memories. The ego needs you to believe that I am the body and the way that it looks, I am the mind and the thoughts which appear in it, and I am my personal history. I am the things I've done and what has happened to me. And these identities are, of course, not real. There is no spoon. So don't try to get rid of these identities. Simply see their unreality. There is no separate self living a separate individual life. It is an illusion. There is only life itself, and you are life itself, pretending to be a person in order to take part in this evolutionary journey. So when you see yourself from the highest reality, then the ego cannot have a foothold on you. So it's true to say that I have a body, a mind, and memories, but the ego wants you to say that I am the body, the mind, and memories. And if it can get you to buy into this idea, then it creates this sense of an imaginary person living a separate life. And it is this imaginary identity that is what causes all of the suffering we experience. When you see yourself the way that the universe sees itself, then you cannot be vulnerable to the programs of the ego. And so you have to first believe that you are somehow separate or disconnected from all of life. And when you believe that, you make yourself vulnerable. So if there is no personal separate identity being believed in, then these kinds of thoughts cannot appear. Because after all, who would they appear to? The actors will not take the stage until the audience has first been seated. Because otherwise, who will they perform for? So begin to identify what ideas you are believing in about yourself. What external things do you think that you need in order to be happy? What roles are you playing that you have perhaps identified with? So to give you a practical example, if you are an aspiring musician, then just be a musician and make music because you love it. But don't allow the mind to get you convinced that I am a musician. Because the moment that you condense an identity, then you attach your sense of self-worth to it. And so now, if someone doesn't like your music, or if you meet a better musician or anything of that nature, then you feel as though your sense of self-worth is being threatened, is being attacked. And instead of making music simply because you love it, now you're doing it to earn approval and validation, and you're always doubting and second-guessing yourself. And so that which used to be a source of joy for you becomes a source of suffering. And whenever you suffer from it, then you strengthen the program and it grows even stronger. So get rid of the anchor point. It's not who you are, it's just something you do. You are the free, universal self, unbound and unlimited. And if you remain unlimited in your identity, then you cannot be bound to the matrix of the mind. So you have to do the work of confronting these anchor points. It might be painful to uproot them, but your freedom is worth anything. Consciousness can only expand. It can never go backwards. And so all that you have to do is remain grounded and unmoved in who you know that you are. And once these programs are not getting your attention any longer, then they have no choice but to dissolve. And that leads me to the final point, which is, don't be swayed by appearances.
You have to let it all go, Neo. Fear, doubt, and disbelief. Free your mind.
Thoughts can only gain influence over you when you take them seriously. But thoughts can only audition for your attention. And when they're not regarded as significant, when they are not believed in, they quickly vanish. So be like Morpheus and free your mind. Remain unmoved and unaffected by whatever appears. The only reason that the thoughts you struggle with now are making so much noise is because you've been giving them so much attention in the past. So you simply need to begin draining them of oxygen by ignoring them. And yes, they may be bringing some painful feelings with them for a while, but so what? So what if you feel some negative emotions? That makes no difference to who you really are. The negative thoughts and emotions are being seen from a place that is already free. Your freedom is not dependent on achieving a state. It is not dependent on feeling or not feeling anything. You are already free. Your freedom is already the case. You are always free, like space. It makes no difference if there's dark clouds or white clouds or no clouds. The space is always unaffected. So be like space. Don't get involved with the thoughts and the feelings of the mind. Simply remain as the witness. Imagine if you were witnessing a car accident one day and a police officer shows up on the scene to take the witness report. And he says to you, "Please tell me what you've witnessed today, sir." And you say, "Well, I was watching as the man ran into the woman, and then the man gets out of his car and he walked over to the woman and he began yelling at her. So I walked over and I grabbed the guy by the collar and started socking him in the face." Well, the cop is gonna say, "Oh, well, can we get another witness, please? Because this guy is a part of the crime scene." So, don't be a part of the crime scene. Don't get involved with thoughts and feelings that you don't like by wallowing and complaining about them. Because if you don't want to experience it, then it didn't come from you, it came from the program. So simply be aware of that and say a firm and appreciative "no thank you" and turn your attention back to whatever feels good. I know that seems like a rather simplistic idea, but I guarantee you that if you do this consistently, it quickly becomes a natural reflex, and you actually lose the ability to take these thoughts seriously anymore. And when these thought patterns are no longer being regarded as significant, then they quickly lose their power over you. And this is what we see in the final scene of The Matrix. When Neo realizes who he truly is, He begins to fight off the agents effortlessly. The moment he stops believing them to be real, he steps into his true power.
He is the one.
So what does it really mean to be free? It means the ability to choose your preference in every moment without being overwhelmed and overpowered by the patterns and programs of the mind. It means being able to live from your chosen state of being and being able to experience whatever life throws at you without being swayed by it, without forgetting who you are. To know that you are the one. You are the universal self, which is already free, and expressing that freedom by being you. And to know that at your core is freedom, is joy. To live from the natural state of existence is bliss. To see life the way that it truly is. To see yourself through the eyes of God. To love yourself. To be the creator of your reality. To be exactly the person that you want to be. That, my friends, is freedom.